Jason, I'm excited to bring you on. So, for those of you listening, maybe you're not familiar with Jason. I was also not until February 6th, but the magical day that was that. I was invited to speak at a seminar out in Nashville, and I met Jason. And I just remember countless times you calling me out in your presentation because we were just very in sync with some of the things we were talking about. So, give me a little bit of some background of who you are, what you do, because I'm really excited to talk about this, like setting your business up to sell it. That's something that I haven't brought on the podcast yet.
Yeah, so name's Jason Roberson. I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. My day in and day out, what I do is I help business owners actually sell their business. So, you own a small business in middle America, you don't know what to do, you're looking to retire, you're just looking to move on to the next thing. You find someone like myself, I help you figure out a value, I help you figure out what's marketable, what's not. I actually go out, advertise, find the buyers, help structure the deal, help set up financing. So all those pieces. Before I did this, I bounced around a little bit. I worked as a stockbroker, financial advisor, and then jumped into corporate America and worked on, large mergers and acquisitions and strategy. So a little bit of everything, with the entire focus being on, the financial well-being, whether an individual or a business throughout that time. I think the only way your listeners may actually know who I am is if they've ever pulled up the Against the Grain podcast and listened to, Jeff Black, Jason Theobald, and then I'm the third member on there that they call Robo that is not in the fitness industry at all.
But you're so like closely tied because of who you know, who you work with. So, it's
Yeah,
fine. I feel like you just fit right in. But
it's a little weird. Yeah, I'm the anomaly. Is that the right word? Yeah.
well, when I was there recording, you weren't there, and I took that personally. So,
Uh,
like,
They
I don't
scheduled
know.
that after I had already made big plans, so I felt terrible, but I had too many people in town. I think we had three
Absolutely.
people staying at our house that weekend.
No, that's, I mean, hey, totally fair. But no, yeah. So if you guys listen to, Jeff Black's podcast, and obviously you guys know Jason because I work with him as well. But um, so I want to get the idea going of like setting your business up to sell it, because none of you listening should be really thinking about that right now, but there might be a time from now in 5 years, maybe even 10, depending on how long you want to do this, where you think, I'm ready to kind of be done with this. Let me sell this. And so I want to dive into that. We're going to go into multiple financial questions as well. But the first thing I want to break down is just this idea that so many businesses really don't scale, right? Like so many businesses fail. And I want you to break down the rate of business failure in the first 5 years, but giving me perspective on the financial reasons that they are failing, not the habits and things of that nature, but financially, what's missing? Because I rarely meet a coach who has any financial literacy, especially in the
Hmm.
first years of their business, right? Like no one taught us this stuff growing up.
I'll take that one step further and say I rarely meet a business owner who has financial literacy at the beginning of it as well. It's a learned skill for sure. I think in the presentation you saw and what I pulled out is the Small Business Administration actually tracks the rate of business failure. And the odds are by about year 6, you're out of business. That's just it. Over 50% fail. By the time you get to year 10, that goes to 70 to 80%. It's the nature of the world where people get into a business because they have a special skill. That could be coaching and fitness. That could be someone who understands plumbing, someone who understands HVAC. And they focus on developing that skill, which is amazing, but you forget to become well-rounded. So you need basic financial literacy. You need to understand basic marketing. You need to understand basic account management for your bank accounts, which is very different than finance even. Those pieces tend to be missing. When you look at the finances of a successful business owner, for one that's not in US, what's missing? Step one, P&L. Most don't even have a P&L. If you don't know what you're making month to month, how do you know if you're ever going to succeed? Second piece would be some sort of budget. If you don't have a budget, again, odds are you don't know what you're going to be doing in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. You can't plan for the future if you don't understand the now.
What would you say on budget in terms of, like profit margins, right? Like what would you say is healthy and I know this will change, right? Because obviously
Mhm.
margins have to dip to scale. Like I can say that's where I'm at this year, but
Mhm.
ultimately, where do you want those margins to be? Where do you see the businesses that are successful in 5 years? What are those margins typically looking like?
It's very industry specific. So, when it gets into coaching, it depends on the style. If you're all online and you're running under a 50% margin, I would love to understand what you're doing because I don't know. It's really tough to do that when your only expense is your laptop and maybe hiring someone to help with the marketing piece, which should be a variable cost, not a fixed cost. But if you go to other industries like a restaurant, if you're doing 12 to 15%, you're cranking, you're doing real well. So it's so industry specific on that.
And I was going to agree with you for the fitness coaching. I think that when your margins start to dip below 50%, I'm questioning that, right? And I know for us, like we maintained 82% up until seven figures. And that's when
Mhm.
every investment I was already making just had to go up. That's when we decided
Mhm.
to stop relying on organic and really crank ad spend, right? And so understanding that to get further will require a hit. And I was actually just talking to one of my other clients who is a mom, wife, two young children. She invested before I would like her to, before I will tell most people to, right? Because she just needed a VA. So like she's making,
Mhm.
she's making six figures, but her margins take a hit so she can have more balance with her family. So again, like understanding that, but if you're not profitable, there's a problem because like you said, the overhead is very minimal. And I think that so many business owners just get lazy and the answer to everything is outsource it, right? And so at the end of the day, you're like, you have no idea what your budget is. You have no idea what your margins are. I was talking to a coach that's making over 500,000 and doesn't know what her contracted revenue is for the year.
It's shocking. And it's scary because I mean you'll see someone who does that and they say 500,000, right? And then they get their taxes back and they made 200,000 on that. Then they scale to 1 million, but then they get their taxes back and they only made 150,000.
Oh,
You're thinking, what happened? What did you do? And I see this in businesses all day long, and they go, "Oh, I grew." It's like at the cost of profit, you grew. You worked harder to make less money. Where does that make sense anywhere in the world?
absolutely, absolutely. So I want to break this down and like we mentioned, just diving into scaling to six figures and what's kind of required there, and then moving into that seven figure mark and how you see just change in leadership, business ownership, and then we're going to talk about setting up to obviously sell your business, right? So when you're seeing these new business owners in the first 1 to 2 years, where do you see their biggest issue with money management?
So they'll start landing some clients early. So, when you don't have any clients, you're pinching pennies, you're very scared. You land a couple big clients, you start to get confident. You think, all right, this is the new normal. And they start to spend. So they go out and they buy a car and they put a car on the business. You have now a $600-700 payment, or you go out and subscribe to a bunch of different things that you think will help you and make you more efficient. I get that you're thinking of the future and scaling, but you don't need that yet. You're just killing your profit, and that's the money you live off of. So it's the biggest mistake I see is they forget to manage those expenses, and they think, you know what, as long as I'm keeping my expenses below the revenue, it's going to keep growing. Never count on the growing. Get the discipline early on to manage, and that discipline will follow you through. And then you can make the right decisions. When you don't have that discipline, it falls apart. Your expenses get out of whack, and you end up losing money as soon as you get one negative time frame. You lose a big client. You want to go on vacation for 2 weeks or a month. You can't afford to do any of those things.
I think what I notice, and again, I'm not the expert you are, is just the lack of awareness and the lack of systems in place, right? Like the amount
Mhm.
of people that are still using Venmo or Zelle or PayPal to run a business and
Mhm.
are not using something like Stripe, it just
Yeah.
baffles me, right? Like the people that, oh yeah, well, they're going to pay me this week. And by the time you get 25, 35 clients, not everybody can just pay you whenever, right? Like how are you managing failed payments? I think that's something that I notice is people are just not acting like business owners, right? They're acting like it's a hobby.
No, and you're absolutely right. I'm going to blow up Jeff Black for a second, but I've done this on another thing, and he was okay with it. He used to use Venmo, and I've trained with Jeff for 5 years. long-term client, I saw his entire business progress. He was doing Venmo, and he would spend days a month, tracking down people who haven't responded to the Venmo, who haven't reached out to him about the next month. There's no contract in place for cancellation. There's no plan in place for how do you handle someone who's just not responding. You need to have a lawyer track that down. You need to have some sort of system where it automatically does it for you. You're absolutely right. It's a huge gap. If you have 2 or 3 clients, no big deal. If you have 100, you're screwed. There's no way to do it effectively with that system. The other piece that comes to mind that I see quite a bit is these owners don't track anything at all data-wise. I know you are a huge proponent of track everything, be able to manage that data. They don't have it. So you ask, where's your customer list? Don't have it. You ask, what was the return on your recent, marketing campaigns? Don't have it. So they have no idea where to effectively even use their money or how it's being used within the business. And once you stop managing that, it just seems to leak out everywhere. I'll give you a unique example. We were talking just before we hopped on. So I'm in the middle of evaluating a business to buy. This business does not keep monthly financials. They could have gotten a higher price, most likely, if they did. But they have no idea what they're doing. They did not keep strong records on expenses. So we had to go back, figure out what the expenses would have been, estimate them. They could have been in a much better position when it came to selling or even managing day to day, but just didn't put in that effort up front.
That's wild. It's funny because I will totally tell on myself for a bit here, because the first year in my business, I was doing so many things right and so many things I was like, I'll get to that later, because I knew I was profitable, but I just was in such a scarcity mindset, being laid off, not having much in my bank account, things like that, right? So I had the financial advisor, I had the tax person, I had all that.
Mm.
I started like I bumped up my savings, but I was doing everything with like a personal account. Like all of my expenses were personal.
Mm.
Now I was very adamant with QuickBooks, like swipe, swipe, swipe. I had all the rules set up, right? But it
Yeah.
wasn't until year 2 where or maybe, I don't know, 9 or so months in, where I got like a business credit card, a business checking account. And I think it's really important. Like one thing I wish I would have done earlier is just separating my finances, even if you're not spending a lot, even if it's just like your mentor that you're putting on a credit card every month, but just having all those subscriptions set up, starting to get some credit built for your business. Like those things are so helpful. And that's one thing I wish I would have done a lot sooner.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's one of the biggest pitfalls is these people will say, look, I have a separate account. It's separate, great. But then in their business account, that's their P&L. They just look at the bank account statement. It tells them how they're doing. They think that the health of that account is equivalent to the health of the business. Well, that's great. But if you have a seasonal business in the winter, that account's going to go to zero. Or if you only manage that way, you lose 1 or 2 big clients, that account goes to zero and you just start to panic because you got used to that higher level. That's where it comes into play, not only the discipline to separate, but the discipline to track what goes in and out, why it goes in and out, how much you're paying yourself, how much the expenses are, and managing that really closely. I'm actually a big believer that you don't use one business account. There's a methodology called Profit First. It's a book by an author. His name's Mike Michalowicz.
You
I
love
won't
that
even
guy.
Yeah, I love that guy. By far, there's maybe 2 authors out there that do small business well. By far, the best that I've ever read. But his methodology and how to manage your business using a 5 account method is life changing for people who've never had that discipline
What's
before.
that book called?
Profit First.
Okay. I was gonna say, I was looking at kind of the ones that you mentioned. I was gonna ask you at some point on this podcast, like if you had to give me 2 recommendations of where to start. But Profit First sounds like one. I think I have that set up in my Audible queue for like my wish list. So
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, the other thing that I was also late to the game on was quarterly taxes, right? I just thought,
Mhm.
I don't need to do that. It's not going to be that big of a hit. And I will never forget the year that I built my house. It's 2022, and I was putting 6 figures down on my house. That would have been my first 7-figure year. I was paying taxes on like a 700K year. But my point is, it was a very high tax bill. And
Mhm.
so within about, 10 seconds, I dropped 300K on just, everything. And I'm like, Taeler, you have to pay quarterly taxes. So then after
Yeah.
that was done, I literally paid the IRS that second for my quarter one. I was like, this is never happening again, right? And so I think that so many business owners, we actually we don't know taxes are coming up. Like we just, oh,
Mhm.
I know they're coming. And then their bank account is depleted. I mean, thank God I saved and had a very high profit margin. But at the end of the day, if you're paying whatever you are once a year, like definitely divide that up because it's going to make you second guess every investment you make. It's going to make you second guess just anything you're doing in your business right then.
Mhm.
Because I grew up with a dad that hoarded money and saved money in his drawers and always told me we would never be rich, we would never have money. And so once I started to get that money, I was like, I don't want to give it to anyone. I want to hoard that money.
Mhm.
So I'm the business owner that spends nothing on myself and only on my business. And my advisor is always like, can you spend like just a little bit more, like maybe get something. But I just think it's so interesting. Like I find that people, they're either one or the other, right? And you can give me your take on this, but the first time I see business owners hit like a really good month for them, like a 10K, 15K, 20K month, they immediately go and buy some dumb shit for themselves. They get a
Yeah.
bigger apartment and then they don't have the money. And I think it's because subconsciously we're more comfortable having no money because we're used to that. Even
Mhm.
though we may not think that out loud, seeing our bank account a little bit low feels normal and seeing it high feels scary. And we almost like do whatever we can, exceed our luxury limit and it's gone. And so I want to know, like, do you see that, like this personal spend increasing? Like, how do you work with your clients on that? Or is that even a topic of discussion?
No, it absolutely comes up. And when it comes to the psychology of why, uh, guys don't understand people well, women do. So I'd trust your opinion before I trust my own. The scarcity mindset is a really good thought behind it. The people who tend to succeed in what I see in small businesses do have that scarcity mindset where it's um, I'm never going to have enough, and I'm worried that one bad event will lose it all. I think you and I both know a couple people in the fitness industry that there's not a number that they're trying to get to, it's just more. Um, that's not necessarily a bad mindset, but at some point, what you were being coached on a little bit, you have to enjoy life too, right? And so there definitely is a balance there. To go back to profit first, he actually recommends a percentage that you use for fun that you make, and you just set that aside in its own separate account, and it's just for fun. And as that builds up, like this is my next trip, this is me going out to eat, whatever it is. There are other ways you can potentially do it, but if you start to go down that path of what you discussed, where you make 10, 20K, you're like, great, I can go out and get, a badass BMW, $100,000, 15, 2 grand payment, and then that, racks up a month. That's where I start to lose my mind when I look at someone's books because I see, their financials and then they'll do something like that. And I say, you just killed yourself. You just killed your profit because this is unpopular. This is tough to say. When you own a small business, you make your money while you own it. You don't make your money when you sell it. You don't get as much as you think you will. This isn't where you're selling a massive company, for $100 million at a 10 times multiple. Small businesses sell for 1 to 3 times, the profit plus the owner's compensation. That's it. So you're maybe getting 2 to 3 years of what you would have made otherwise. You need to make your money while you own it. You need to invest that well. If you're buying stupid crap, you're never going to be free of the rat race. You're going to have to work your entire life.
Where do you recommend, speaking of just like having your money make money, right? When you
Mhm.
are, in that first few years under the six-figure mark, around the six-figure mark, you
Mhm.
don't have a ton of disposable income, especially those of my clients and people listening that have families and whatnot, right? Where do you recommend starting with investments or wealth management, anything like that?
Yeah, so one of the easiest things is something called a Roth IRA. I would recommend this if you're not making much money. And a Roth IRA is basically money that you earn, but you put it in after taxes are taken out. So there's no tax deduction. but there's a couple of huge benefits to that account. One is that you can pull the money out tax and penalty free that you put in if you need it for an emergency. So if you put in 5 grand, it grows to 5,500, and then 2 years later you have an emergency, you can pull that initial 5K out and use it. That is a huge benefit. It can almost be like a safety net if you really need it. But you also have the ability to just let it grow towards retirement. And when you go to withdraw that in retirement at age 59 and a half, there's no taxes, none. Like it's amazing. Traditional 401ks, you get taxed when you pull that out. Traditional retirement accounts, you get taxed. This one really benefits you when you don't make any money. Try and put as much as you can into it. And then years down the road, you will benefit from that greatly, but you still have the access to it if there's an emergency. The other thing I start to, really recommend is get a really good accountant or tax advisor. Although you can't put much away, even 2, 3,000, it'll start to add up over time. And there are other types of retirement accounts where, let's say you make 100,000 in a year and you can stick, 2, 3, 4,000 in there. We won't go into, compounding returns too far, but it'll grow massively if you invest that well. Plus that 100,000 on your tax return now is reduced to 96,000 you're getting taxed on. It is a tax break for you. Those two are the big ones. When you get a good accountant or tax return, they'll talk to you about health savings accounts. They'll talk to you about how to structure the money that you're receiving via an LLC, via a corporation or sole proprietorship to get you the most effective tax rate as well. Definitely things that when you start to get near the 6-figure mark, you absolutely need to have those conversations. I would argue once you're over 50 or 60K and you can meet your monthly obligations, okay, save 3 months emergency savings and then start having those conversations immediately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So scaling to 7 figures, let's talk about that and how that changes. So where do you see coaches really struggling, or it might be the same thing with managing their money once they've got, a small team, they're making $250,000 plus, 500,000 maybe, like where are they screwing up?
So we're making the assumption they've already built a little bit of a team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's say they've got 2 people on their team, maybe some assistant coaches, a
Yeah.
virtual assistant, small.
Giving up control. They micromanage the shit out of their teams. And so they spend all their time doing that. When you start to build a team out and you start to get big, your job is growing the business. Your job is to work on the business, not in the business as much. And so what I see most often is these people will try and control their teams, every single action they take. Even if this person is only 80% as capable as you are, that's freeing up a significant amount of your time, and they will get better. Coach them up, they'll get better. They're going to make mistakes. Be okay with that. Let them make those mistakes, let them learn, keep them around, and they will free up your time to continue growing that business massively. So that is like number one, by far and away, the biggest thing I see is control freaks just won't ever let go, and it's going to kill you long term. The
I
other
see
one
the
I see
opposite of that sometimes too, though. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, where it's like
yeah.
they don't micromanage, but they're so hands off that their
Mhm.
setter isn't performing and they're wondering why, or their OBM is all of a sudden sick all the time and they have no
Yeah.
idea what projects they were working on, right? Like I see
Yeah.
that dynamic more
Yep.
than I see the micromanaging, but I agree with you. I think a lot of us are very afraid to give up control. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the making mistakes. I think that's so important. And it's really hard for us as business owners to admit that that's okay, because I think we expect our team to move as fast as us. And anyone on my
Mhm.
team can tell you, like, we move at lightning speed. Like, I get an
Yeah.
idea, I want to implement today, we want to move tomorrow. And I know that that's not realistic all the time. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think just making sure that your vision is very clearly laid out, expectations, communication, open dialogue, but your goal should be to build autonomy with your team members. Absolutely. But yeah.
Yeah, and it goes into the second one I see, which is there's no data management, there's no plan, there's no tracking, no nothing. And if you do that appropriately, you know what your team is doing, you know where to coach. So is it they're not getting enough leads, or is it they're not converting the leads? Is it they're only getting one type of lead, but this other side you invested a lot and nothing's coming in there. You don't even know where to coach without that. And so, if you have those people like you mentioned who are just so hands off, you're just spending money at that point, throwing it up and just hoping that you get that return until you track the data. Once you start tracking that, you can really narrow in and say, this niche is killing it for me. Let's just double down there rather than spreading it this wide.
Absolutely. So this is where I start to notice this like cling to money. So I don't know if you notice this, but when I see a business owner, hit their first 10K month, they're like,
Mhm.
yay, I've made it. I can now hire a VA. Meanwhile, when a coach hits their first 300K, 500K, they're like, nope, I can't invest in anything. I have no money. It's almost like the opposite happens. And so because
Mhm.
they're too afraid to invest in the $1,000 a month accounting team or the $2,000 a month business manager that could give them the most beautiful dashboard in the world or whatever, right? Like I noticed that that's when that starts. And so I don't know if you ever see basically like the business owner is uh like the problem.
The business owner is always the problem.
Oh, well, yes, that's a whole,
Yeah.
that could be a podcast, right? Like
Yeah.
that could
Yeah.
be a totally different thing. But just curious to know your thing because I feel like when we talk about financing and wealth
Mhm.
management, it's always the back burner for these business owners scaling to seven because they have so many other messes to clean up that they just are
Mhm.
kind of avoiding.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be open to spending money when you hit that level, but you spend it smart. So that's where you hire an accountant, say, I can't track this day in and day out. Have someone else do it. You can review the info. Hire someone who does data analytics, part-time, whatever it takes to take things off your plate, invest in that because realize you grew the business by investing your time in things that grow the business. You didn't grow the business by managing the minutia. So if you free up that time, it'll continue to return. But you're right, most are afraid of that. They think if I start spending this money, it never gets returned to me. That's the difference in what I see in someone who goes to 8 figures versus even 7 figures. And even down to 6 figures is their willingness to risk, 5 grand a
Damn
month
everything.
or 50 or 100 grand, on a big project. They'll take big swings for big rewards because they trust that if it goes wrong, they can bounce back every time. It's risk tolerance to a certain extent. I think those people make 500K are afraid of taking more risk because they haven't had to take significant risk. If they have a bad month, they can let their VA go. But if they put 50 grand in a big project, that money could just be gone forever, and they've never had to mentally wrap their head around that sort of investment. It's a new, I guess, ocean for them to step into.
Well, and I talk about that pretty frequently with my clients and just on social media where, decisions go from being a, 10K decision to a six-figure decision.
Mhm.
And I know that my wealth like management team, like the guy that I work with, I remember having the talk with him before this year started. And I said, okay, we're really cranking up ad volume. We're really cranking up
Mhm.
ad spend. It's going to be a little crazy. My margins are going to take a hit, but this is how I know I'm going to triple my gross profits, right? So we're not going to, it
Mhm.
may not happen next year, but I'm telling you, I have all the faith in the world. And I just remember him being like, okay, if you think that's necessary, but like, let's watch it. You know what I mean? Because he's obviously
Mhm.
trying to be more conservative, but I'm somebody that I have never put money in something, even if it was a bad investment that didn't give me ROI in the long
Yeah.
term, right? Like that didn't teach me something. And I think one thing that my mentor asked me the very first day we started working together years ago is he said, what are you willing to risk? And it was like a survey that he gave me, right? And I was supposed to put a percentage. And I will never forget the fact that I put 40%. And that was just like this funny discussion. He was like, so you're only willing to risk 40%? Like, you're not going to build an 8-figure business like this. And it kind
Mhm.
of was that moment where I said, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not. Like, if I don't really play big, then I'm not going to win. I think that that's really helpful. And whether you want to build an 8-figure business or seven or whatever, like, you have to understand that you have to take massive risks, but massive risks require you to know your data better than anything else. And that's why the risks feel scary because you don't have the data showing you that it actually makes logical sense to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and then you're just guessing. You're
Mhm.
going with your gut, and you could be right, you could get lucky, but you can't do that every time. You're not going to bet 1,000% with eyes closed, right? At some point, you're going to start missing the ball.
Yeah.
You hit on something that always makes me laugh as well. It's when you get someone who's a financial manager or an accountant or a friend who works for a big corporation and it is an executive, and they start giving you advice on how to run your small business. It's you've worked in corporate, you've been a salaried employee your entire life. What do you know about any of this? Like you don't understand risk. When I get someone who reaches out to me to buy a business and they say, yeah, I'm in corporate America. I'm looking to make a change. I have 2 kids. I have a wife. I have a house in the suburbs. Or I have a husband, who's going to help me day to day. The wife's going to do, whoever that is, they're not going to buy it. They don't have the guts. I just know that. I've seen it time after time. And that's the difference between people you coach. When you step out in that coaching world, you are an entrepreneur, you're taking a risk. You have to realize it's not as though it's a one-time risk. You continually take that risk throughout your career as long as you work for yourself.
Absolutely. So let's talk about setting your business up to actually sell it, right? So my clients that I'm working with now, I'll just use them as an example for us to give some guidance to them, right?
Mhm.
But once you start to hit that 250,000, you're like, I know I'm doing this. I am in it for the long haul, right? We're not thinking about selling it, but what are some things that I should be thinking about now to prepare me for that day if and when it comes?
Yeah, the number one thing is branding. So if it's, Taylor's coaching business, it makes it really tough to sell because it's you. And I'll go back to that and talk about creative structures where you still can monetize and exit out of that. But when you look at branding, you start to look at, all right, this business is, 5, 10 people, that's what I'm looking to grow to. What's it going to look like at that point? Is it going to be, a name? Let's just say like Jason's coaching business, we change it to, rabbit coaching, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But you start to take yourself a little bit out of that branding and you spread it around more. Um, when you do that, you start to open the door to someone else stepping in because you have to look at it as you're the buyer. If you're buying a business, are you going to buy something that's named after someone and they're gone and it's all based on their brand and the social media is all them? You can't do it. So you have to spread that out. You have to make your team the forefront of it, or you have to make things like client transformations the forefront. And the team's just kind of behind the scenes. So really focus on the branding that you would want if you were a buyer. The other piece is start focusing on a long-term structure that allows flexibility for the owner. If someone's coming in to buy it, odds are they already own their own business. They can't put in 100 hours a week. They just can't do it between the two. If you're working 100 hours a week, you're probably not ready to sell. When you start to build out that team, you start to take responsibilities and divvy them out, and you lessen that to about 40 hours a week, it becomes far more attractive. If you can get it down to 20 and they can buy it while still running their other business and do that effectively, that is, the other huge piece. Plus, it means you can take vacations. It means your life gets better. If you make it almost an entirely absentee business, I promise you it'll sell every day of the week. It's the gold standard in our industry. It's really hard to build to, but if absentee, I say maybe you're spending 10 hours a month. Um, you're you're going to sell. Honestly, why would you sell at that point though? You're doing so well. Working 10 hours a month, keep that forever, keep the cash coming.
So for somebody that's thinking like, I guess what is the age you see? So we're looking in the fitness coaching space, right? Like, do you see, I'm sure you see all ages, but realistically, like, when do you see coaches thinking about actually selling their business? Is it year 10? Is it like,
Yeah.
what's the timeline on that?
So this is kind of funny. After that seminar, I talked to a couple who reached out to me because they wanted to know, hey, I'm considering doing this in the next few years. And they were all in their late 20s and early 30s. And I think the reason is they're burning out because they weren't building it the way that was sustainable for them. Where I really see people, and what tends to happen with those folks is they start talking about it, then they understand what it's going to take and that this isn't enough money to last your entire lifetime. They got used to making good money, living a nice life. They're going to have to go back to work. And so they back out. And when people get really serious is when they're in their late 40s, getting around 50. Their kids are starting to grow, especially when they become empty nesters. That's when they get serious about selling and saying, you know what, I don't need this much money to live off of. Let's sell this, let's exit, let's, invest this money appropriately, let's buy something else. Um, that late 40s, 50s, the kids are about 16, 17 years old. That's where I see the absolute majority. In the fitness and health space, I don't get people going into retirement ever asking me questions. It just doesn't happen. You're not owning a brand at that point. Um, Partially because part of the brand is your body. And if your body is not holding up at that age, it doesn't happen. I think the oldest one I've talked to is probably 55. And that was really it.
I was gonna say, did that person start their business late? Because I just can't, I'm at the point where I truly can't imagine selling my business.
Mhm.
I can imagine myself changing my branding, which is already in the works, right? Because I can't have an 8-figure business with my face everywhere. It's going to have to just
Right.
evolve as well. But so I can see myself slowly being a little more removed in the, 10-year future. But I can't imagine myself ever fully selling it unless it's like I've built an 8-figure coaching business and I'm so obsessed with it here, somebody else can take it and run with it. I can see that, but that just feels so far away. Um, I don't know. Do you ever get anyone that sells their business and then regrets it?
No, I get ones that
Okay.
list their business and you get close to the sale and then they come back and they get cold feet and back out.
Okay.
But I've never had it where someone sold. I have it where they sold and they go, I love it, but I'm bored now. I want to buy something else. Which perfect, fine. I'd love to get you another business, to buy and then build again because then I can sell it again. It's great for me. But yeah, no one really sells and then says, I regret free time. They say, I just need to figure out what to do next.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like most of the coaches that are building successful businesses, especially if you're working with somebody it's built like an 8-figure business, I feel like those people never really stop working. They just change what they do. They may sell the business and then like kind of tweak what they're doing, but I just think about my mentor and people that, he coaches and I'm like, God, these people seem like they always have their hands in stuff. You know what I mean? Like I think that's hard to imagine. Um,
I think that's a mentality thing too.
yeah.
When you start to get 8 figures, you talk about the people who don't know how to hit that off switch, who don't know how to go on vacation, who don't know how to release. And those are also the people who are up at night, who constantly have racing thoughts, who get anxious. It's a trade-off. You can become a high achiever. It's kind of like when you think of billionaires, there's not a billionaire who ever got that way without being a narcissist. Um, you just have to be wired different ways to do different things. And I know, for me personally, I burn out at 32 and realize life is more important. And so if I have that opportunity to work 80 hours a week and make a little bit more money, or I can stay at, 45, 50, I've chosen to be that 45, 50. And those people have chosen to be that 80 hours a week.
For the coaches that are hitting burnout relatively quickly, like their burnout cycle
Mhm.
is pretty quick, what advice would you give them to rearrange the structure of their business or just the structure of their work week?
Yeah, I'll start off by giving you a quick story, and this is the cautionary tale. So when I hit burnout, I was a consultant on mergers and acquisitions. So I'd go in when one company was buying another, and help carve out the businesses, or when a company bought another and merge them together. And we had a deadline. You had to do all this work before the sale, all this work after. I was working 100+ hour weeks in a different city, living in hotels every night, not taking care of my health, having to have 6, 7 cups of coffee a day just to stay awake because I was so tired. And so, of course, when I hit burnout, I hit it hard. I put in my notice, gave them 3 weeks, and I just left the country. I left everything, locked up my house, and I was gone for about a month and a half. And I would have been gone for probably a year but I flew back for a friend's wedding. It was long enough to have that reset, but that's the risk you're going to run into. It took me traveling across the world, meeting people from all over the world who live different lives to realize there's a lot of things more important than money. Once you realize that, it changes your entire relationship to it. What I should have done, and retroactively, and again, I mean, I'm no psychologist. I'll take advice from women before I'd recommend taking it from me because, again, you guys just read people better. You understand empathy. Um, but you need to reprioritize and say, all right, if I'm stressed out, what's the reason for my stress? Is it I don't have systems in place? Is it, I have too much going on, so I have systems in place, but there's simply too much? Is it my fear of handing things off and hiring someone? There's almost always a way that you can make that situation better. What I see most commonly is it's not having systems in place. So you start to put those systems in, you take a step back from your business. If that means you have to tell your clients, I need a week off. I'm just going to recharge, build some, you do whatever it takes to step back, because once you do that and you're able to flex, your entire perspective changes.
That's
The other
yeah,
piece I'd say
oh, go
is
ahead, sorry.
you got to talk to a performance coach, not just a business coach, because a business coach is going to help you get more. I use one, and I'm very successful in what I do, but I talk to a performance coach where I say, hey, here are my issues. Here's what I'm running into. What am I not seeing? And he'll start to poke holes in how I'm, attacking my life, how I'm attacking my relationships, and then, trying new things. He's the one who got me into journaling. He's the one who I used to do ice baths at night. I'm going to start doing them in the afternoons just for mental resets, and entirely, it's the tiniest things, but it changes your entire perspective on the day. I think it's more important than business coaches in some way because for me, it's feng shui for my mind.
And I think it depends on the coach too, right? Because
Yeah.
to me, there's like a coach, a mentor, and a consultant. I think all of them have
Mhm.
very different involvements, because if you're just involved in like, I don't know, a course, you're not going to get that like one-to-one connection. And you don't need it at the very beginning of your business. You don't.
No.
Like, everyone needs the same advice. But once you're really running like a multi-six plus figure business, like, you want somebody working with you privately that knows you in and out and isn't just going to feed you strategy. Because most of the conversations I have with my clients are actually not strategy, because they can't wrap their mind around it, or we've got to train a team member, or their stress is so high that they're not even like, I mean, this sounds silly, but like, they're not sleeping with their partners anymore. They're too stressed to even think about that. It's like, cool, we're going to talk about that and your adrenals before we talk
Mhm.
about this sales strategy, because that's not going to, they're not going to work together. And so I was going to say, like, the issue that I see a lot is just literally the efficiency, right? And I think that,
Mhm.
understanding that whatever got you to this level, we have to keep doing that stuff, but at a higher volume and
Mhm.
not letting it drop. I think a lot of coaches will, slow down their DMs, slow down their sales process to focus on building their assistant coaches. And they turn around and they wonder why sales aren't coming in as fast as they were. It's because you took the gas off of something else, right?
Mhm.
And I know every level of business, it's going to pull you in again before you get out of it. And I think that's also really important to understand, is it's not going to be linear. You're not just going to forever be slowly removed. Like, you're going to be in and then out and then in and then out, right? Every time you hire a new team member, you're more involved training them before it's hands off, especially
Yeah.
like sales team members. And I think just the expectation, this idea that I get a 50K month, I'm living my dreams. Like, in some aspects, financially, absolutely, but you're going to be very, very involved in a business that is bringing in 50K months, right? And I think that's also just like a perspective that I don't think many people talk about, right? We look at this number in our head and we think, once I get to that point, I'm hands off.
The metaphor that comes to mind is, think of a factory. You have a line that produces products, right? That line can only produce so many products. So you have a couple options. Like, you have your first shift, the daytime, then you have your evening shift, then you have your overnight shift. Once you do that, you pretty much max out. There's nothing you can do. And like, each time you add it, so you have your first shift, you're making products, you're going up, and then you cap. They make as much as they can. So you have to hire that second shift, it plateaus. And then you hire that second shift, and it goes up again, and then third shift, and then you run out of space. You can't do any more. You have to add another line. Well, what happens when you add that second line? Well, your focus goes a little bit off of managing that one, so you're going to maybe dip, kind of wave a little bit. And then once you put in that second line, you hire that team, it skyrockets. It's the exact same for how we function as humans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that when we look at finances and whatnot, I think that we often avoid like the mindset around it. And that's really what I
Mm,
wanted to kind of, bring up with you too, is you to me take like a very holistic look at this, at selling your business. Like you're looking at efficiencies, you're looking at the business owner in general, you're looking at
mm,
their emotional regulation, their financial literacy, all the things. It's not just give me the papers and let's go. And I think that business owners, we try to, push things under the rug and avoid what we're actually feeling because we can just compartmentalize that, but it's all going to combust at some point. The bigger a business owner gets, or the bigger a business gets, I feel like there's a few more mental breakdowns throughout the year as they grow because it just gets harder.
mhm.
And no one ever talks about business being hard. We just see the Lamborghinis and the Rolexes.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, my firm took over another firm last summer. And so my processes worked for me. And then I hit exactly what you talk about. Processes no longer work because, I went from carrying what's normally 10 to 15 listings to 25. That's double the work. And so I was killing myself, and it started to impact my life. It started to impact my relationship. And so it became a question of how do I start to solve these problems? And so I went out and I sought out a CRM, a customer relationship management software. And we found one, and it works, and we implemented it. And then I started to put other systems in place, and it changed my life. I'm now doing this year, Q1. I had a bigger Q1 than I did in the last 2 years total. I'll have made more in the last 2 years combined in the first 6 months, and it's because of those systems in place. But I wouldn't have done that unless I took the time to slow down and put those in place.
I think slowing down to speed up is so helpful because
Yeah.
the rate in which you get to level one, whatever that is in your head, is going to be way faster than level two and
Mhm.
still faster than level three, right? Like, I don't know. I think like the 0 to 10K is relatively quick. I think 10K to 50K is slower. I think 50K to 150K is even slower, right? Because it requires a lot of changes in your business. Um,
Yeah.
so
I don't know if you watch Netflix often. You seem like you're pretty busy, but there's Grow or
listen,
Dies on the.
I binge some shows, okay? I binge
Okay.
Suits in about a month. I don't want to talk about it. It's very embarrassing.
I never heard that. Yeah, you're good. Grow or Die is on there. It's about the story of Uber. And
Yes.
that's the idea in tech, where if you're not growing, you're dying. It's always hustle. And we get that idea into our head. It does not work that way in just about any other industry besides tech. It's like you said, it's not linear. It's a stair-step method. And especially, I would call coaching a service industry. If you're going like this, please share your secrets, because I've never seen that in my life. It kind of goes like this, and you might have a bump, then that's absolutely normal, and it's nothing to panic about as long as you know you're making progress towards the future. It's okay to leave a little bit there.
Absolutely. Is there anything that I didn't ask you? I know I have like one more quick question about some books, but otherwise, is there anything else I should have asked you for these coaches that are looking at potentially systemizing their business, getting ready to sell, financial literacy, anything like that?
There's a comment I'll make on something you said a little bit ago, which is when they don't have financial literacy, or when they don't have a skill, it scares them. They back away. The true successful entrepreneurs dive into that. They dive into those moments where they don't understand something to learn it every way they can. So if you're not financially literate, start watching YouTube videos, hire an accountant, have them talk to you, do whatever it takes to build that skill set. You don't have to have every skill in the business, but you have to know a little bit about everything in the business. If you don't, you never have a chance. So you're going to learn digital marketing, you're going to learn SEO, all these things as a business owner that might pop up. Um, if you fear, learning something, you've probably already lost. There's something bigger going on, and you need to talk to someone to help get that out of your head. You need to crave that knowledge.
I think if you fear learning something, I'm questioning the entrepreneur in you though. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's every day. I literally learn something. That is not a cheesy
Yeah.
thing I'm saying. Like I truly learn something new and I'm truly solving a new problem every single day. Something always pops up, you know?
Yeah. One of my favorite things about my job more than anything else is I get a chance to see, I've probably seen hundreds of different businesses, the books, how they run, talk through it with the owners. And so now I take all those lessons from one and apply it to the others when I'm giving advice or ideas. I've seen how it runs in 100 different businesses in 100 different industries. That's what you need. Talk to people, network, learn, and you'll see where everything crosses at some point.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to link you below. So if anyone is interested in getting a hold of Jason, feel free. You can bother him or not in probably appropriate communication channels. But you mentioned reading Profit First. What's the other book that I know you listed a few, but what's like another one that you would say is like definitely start here?
I would go for I would call it Traction. That would be a really good one. So the book Traction is about developing an operating system for your business once you start to scale. It's how you handle meetings. It's how you talk with the team. It's how you send work down. It's how you get reports back. That is one of the most effective operating systems for a business. Once you get 7 figures and you have a team of 5 or more, you need an operating system, and that is the best one I've seen out there.
All right, Profit First and Traction. You guys heard it here first. And now we're all thinking about, setting our business up for scaling and removing our faces. Everyone's listening to this thinking, oh my God, my branding is too me. No, 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 no. Calm down.
No, not yet. Yeah.
We can all rebrand later. You're not selling your business yet, but this has been super helpful. Really, I appreciate you hopping on, and I'm sure I will chat with you pretty soon.
All right. Well, great talking to you. Thanks for having me.